A good day to all of you, and welcome to the show Living Multiculturalism with Mayank Bhatt. You're watching TAG TV. The show is brought to you by the Canadian Thinkers Forum. We have with us today an art curator who's working in diversity. He tries to bring out talent which is normally not shown or not talked about in the mainstream. Ali Adil Khan has been doing this for the last 20 years. Welcome to the show, Ali.
Thank you, Mayank. Thank you for having me over here.
So let's begin, Ali, by talking about your journey. I got to know of you from the art curation that you've done about the Bollywood film posters. I think that was about 4 years back.
Yes.
But of course, you've been doing this for many years. So let's begin with what inspired you to do that show on Bollywood film posters, and then we can take the journey back.
Sure, Mayank. That show was done at Art Gallery of Ontario in, I believe, 2010 as part of the Mosaic Festival. And the show was named or titled Picture House, the Art of Bollywood. I researched based on the art that used to be produced, hand painted on posters, and then multiple copies would be made. And similarly, you remember that the billboards were hand painted by M.F. Hussain and other artists. So that inspired me, and a lot of these artists are really not known, like Divakar, Gopal Kamble, and others. So that inspired me to do a show and bring it here because it's a dying art.
What struck me was not so much the fact that you had managed to get film posters from over 50 years, but also that you understood the significance of each of these to the progression of art. And I believe you've done extensive research on the painters themselves.
Yes, that's correct, Mayank. So I went to Mumbai, I met with the artists. There's actually only one or two surviving artists who are actually doing hand painted billboards and posters. One is in Mumbai, the other one lives in Pune, Divakar. So I did the research, I saw them paint. Some of them are credited to create the persona of a lot of actors like Amitabh Bachchan. The angry young man persona that Amitabh carries is given by Divakar, the artist. A lot of people don't know. If you look at the poster of Diwar, where his face is all lit up red with anger, that's Divakar. If you look at some of the other posters like Sholay, and these posters were made to tell the entire story to the people. This is before there was TV. So when somebody is standing at a bus stop and looking at a poster, they would know, okay, the story is about a love triangle, for instance. Amitabh would be in the middle and there would be two women, So the poster told the entire story, and it was an advertisement at that time.
You also been very active with contemporary South Asian artists who live and work in Canada. I can easily recall your association with Yongo Verma. Unfortunately, he passed away recently. You were the one who introduced me to him. I want you to briefly describe your association with him and the significance of his art.
Absolutely, and I'm happy to tell you that Art Gallery of Mississauga has asked me to curate a show in July this year at the time of the Mosaic Festival, a retrospective of Yongo Verma. I've been trying to convince them to have this show for the last 3 years, and unfortunately they couldn't have it during, when he was alive, but it's happening now. Now, Yongo Verma has lived in Canada for the last 25 years, actually in Mississauga, and very interesting character. He's very inspired by Ghalib. A lot of people are, but he was extraordinary. Also, his art was around cosmic energy, tantra, all of that. I learned a lot from him by interacting with him. His works are in the Brooklyn Museum, for instance. Last year, I was able to actually convince Royal Ontario Museum in Toronto to buy one of his works for their permanent collection. His work is all based on pencil and charcoal, and it's very sculptural. When you look at his works, it looks like a sculpture in reality, but it's actually pencil on paper. It takes him a lot of time. It's very meticulous sort of work. I don't believe there is any Canadian or American artist close to his work, and that's what I feel, that a lot of Indian artists or South Asian artists are if not superior, equivalent to a lot of Western artists.
It's a good segue into a conversation or a discussion that I've always wanted to have. I've consistently felt that you have held this opinion that South Asian artists or artists from a different background do not get the kind of recognition that they deserve in North America. Perhaps because the idiom is different, the understanding of art is different. I want you to share your views on this subject.
Absolutely. So Mayank, it's the same thing. I don't know, when you immigrated to Canada, if you experienced this, I did 25 years ago. When I went looking for a job, they would say, but you don't have Canadian experience. So it's the same thing for Indian or South Asian artists. When they go to the galleries, they show their work, the galleries tell them this is not Canadian art. What is Canadian art? Is Canadian art just landscapes, the group of seven? So that barrier is there somehow, and that's what inspired me to open the gallery, South Asian Gallery of Art, and I worked with ROM and SAVAC and some of the other organizations to break those barriers down. Because art is art. Art has no boundaries, right? There's no Canadian art. There is no Islamic art. I know our Aga Khan Museum has just recently been open to present. So that's what sort of got me going to establish South Asian Gallery of Art and promote South Asian artists, because I saw them struggling. Artists came from Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka. They could not get into the mainstream, because of that barrier. But now it's different. Now works of Hussain, Raza, Sadiq Khan are selling for millions of dollars. People realize that they are as good as Picassos of the world or Salvador Dali's of the world.
Is it also the fact that maybe appreciation of art of artists who still continue to work and operate out of the environment in South Asia get a better appreciation than those who have immigrated to North America or Europe?
I would agree with you on that, Mayank.
And the reason for that?
The reason is that the art market is really back there in South Asia for Indian artists or Pakistani artists. The collectors are there. There's also another aspect, which is a lot of investment is done in cash in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. So people have a lot of disposable income. In North America, when you immigrate, you're struggling for the first 5-10 years to establish yourself. You don't have disposable income to invest in art. So that's another reason where some of the artists don't succeed as well. I always tell the artists I meet here to go back to their home countries and exhibit every year. If you look at Raza lived in Paris, but he always went back. If you note some of the other artists who live in North America, they've been successful because of that.
That brings me to the other great friendship that you enjoy with Panchal Mansaram. I believe it's a unique kind of relationship that you have with him. I want you to describe that friendship and then to talk about Mansaram's contribution to, I would say, Canadian art.
Absolutely, Mayank. So when I first called him, this is back in 2004 or 5, I wanted to visit his studio, and he said no. When there's a next exhibition, I'll invite you, come to that. But I was persistent. Finally, I got invited, and I was able to convince again Royal Ontario Museum to acquire 2 of his works in 2005. So for artists, it's a sort of a major recognition once a museum or a major art gallery acquires their work. The relationship since then has grown. I've learned a lot from Mansaram. His art, he calls it Mansa Media. He's invented that or coined that term, which is basically he uses his photographs or imagery that he takes of street scenes in Banaras. For example, I have a photograph of his in my collection where he captured a man drinking tea out of a saucer, right? And it's a man in Rajasthan. So those kind of scenes he captures, like on the ghats of Banaras, in the deserts of Rajasthan, in Mumbai, in his Ye Hai Mumbai series. So he's very successful. Recently, Royal Ontario Museum acquired almost 250 of his work for research and for archival purposes.
You have always also been involved with the Royal Ontario Museum for a lack of a better word, to educate Canadians on South Asian art. What is that all about?
So when I first moved to Canada 25 years ago, I saw there was a gap. I went to the Art Gallery of Ontario. I saw no works by South Asian artists or African artists. I think the first work of an African artist was bought much recently, like 10 years ago by them. They still don't have any works of South Asian artists. Similarly, Royal Ontario Museum is far ahead of rest of the institutions because they have a Christopher Ondaatje Gallery of South Asian Art, which was a collaborative effort between the people of Toronto, South Asians. They raised money for the curator's position and the gallery, along with Christopher Ondaatje. With ROM, it's a great partnership, great relationship. I've been able to convince them to acquire almost 20 works of South Asian artists, Zainul Abidin from Bangladesh, Sadiq Khan from Pakistan, Jamni Roy from India. These are just few names, but I must mention Dr. Deepali Diwan, who's been with the ROM since 2002, has been instrumental in building that permanent collection.
You periodically take, visit South Asia, and you go to Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, everywhere, and you do this almost 2 or 3 times in a year. Every time you go there, you're meeting artists, you're meeting, creative people. What drives this? What is the source of this energy?
So, Mayank, by profession, I am an engineer, and then I did an MBA in finance. These are very dry subjects, right? So art is what sort of excites me, and it's a distraction, if you will, or a deviation. And I find artists very interesting people, because they look at the world in a very different way than you and I do. They put a different lens. They are critical about everything. If you ask them what they think about, Donald Trump, they'll tell you clearly. Now, so that's what inspires me. I've met in my travels all the major Indian masters like Akbar Padamsee. Last year I met Raza, who's 96 now. I've met Kibriya in Bangladesh. I also like to go and see what's going on in the schools. So I visited JJ School of Art. I visited, the National College of Arts in Lahore. I've often visited some of the other like schools in Dhaka as well. So that's to understand art, to know what's going on, what are the movements, I have to do that.
And what do you get from those visits which you don't find here?
That's a very good question, Mayank, and it's more the sense of the roots. The artists there are working around the political and social issues that they encounter. For example, the honor killings, for instance, in Pakistan. It's an issue. All the artists are bringing that into their work. Similarly, suicide bombings, like Imran Qureshi is one of the most famous Pakistani artists. He got inspired when he actually saw an aftermath of a suicide bombing in Lahore. His paintings are based on that. He painted the roof of MoMA in New York, Museum of Modern Art, based on that. So he splatters all the paint, red paint, and the paint color is the closest to our blood color. And then he does fine miniature style of paintings in that. So it's that's what I find. There is more depth to that art. Like I told you in the beginning, it's landscape don't do anything. If I want to see landscape, I'll go to Algonquin Park or somewhere up north in Ontario. More depth about what are the real social issues, right? What are the real political issues that they are encountering, and that comes out in their art.
My show is about multiculturalism, and I have been talking to writers, poets, musicians, artists. You are a curator, very deeply connected with the creative world. I want 2 reactions from you. One is, what can we do to make multiculturalism in Canada more meaningful in terms of creative, creative culture? And the other is, what is it that we cannot achieve in despite whatever else that we do?
Absolutely. Again, a great question, Mayank. So I think all multicultural people like you and I should volunteer more. We should get into the mainstream organizations, get on the boards of Art Gallery of Ontario, Royal Ontario Museums, those kind of organizations, and influence them, introduce them to our art. For example, yesterday I was flying back from New York. The lady sitting next to me was on the board of MoCA, Museum of Contemporary Art in Toronto. And we started chatting, and I went to see the Armory show in New York, which is the largest in the world. And so I told her about how rich South Asian art was. So I opened a new window for her. I think more and more of that needs to be done. The second thing is we need to support our own artists. So artists are very committed people. They don't have a regular income like most of us. They only make money when they sell their art. So we need to support them in whatever way possible, by buying their art, by appreciating their art. And thirdly is going to see, participating in exhibitions. If there is an exhibition by by a South Asian artist, we all have to support them by just going and seeing their work.
And even when we do all of these things, and you've been doing this for the last 2 decades, do you think that you have, or people like you have been able to make a dent in mainstream culture so that there is a more nuanced understanding of what others are trying to do?
I would think so. Basically,
you would think so, or you would like to believe so?
I think you asked what is not possible. The art. So there is the art of the possible and the art of not possible. You can bring a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, right? The ultimate appreciation for an artist is when his or her art is bought by someone, not necessarily a collector. I have educated the people of South Asia and even the mainstream about Indian art. I failed in convincing Art Gallery of Ontario to acquire art, for instance, by South Asian artists or do exhibitions. I think they did an exhibition on Maharaja, which was a few years ago. Similarly, our own very high net worth South Asians, I visit their homes and I see posters on the walls, right? They can definitely afford to acquire works of living artists either here or in back home. So I would encourage everyone to acquire art. If they can't afford it, at least see art and appreciate it.
Brings me to a fundamental question that I've always wanted to ask you. You have a deep and passionate understanding of art. Have you ever been an artist?
No, I haven't, because
Why
I
not?
strongly believe that, art is a gift. I really believe. I don't have that. It's a third eye that, has to be opened. So a lot of people say, that a genius is born. I believe, yes, geniuses are born. You can become a genius. And genius artists or great artists show their genius before they are 30, at a very early age. All the big artists you'll see have accomplished great heights even before they were 30, 35. You think of Chuktai, Jamni Roy, talk of M.F. Hussain. And then there are the masters. So you can work hard to become a good artist, but to be a great artist, you're either born with that talent or so you have to be born with it.
I'm going to take the conversation in 2 different directions, but first let me ask you this question. You had done a show in Mississauga at the Living Arts Center where you had a musician and an artist work together to create a fusion. This is something that was tried in India by Hussain and Ravi Shankar, and I saw this for the first time in Canada. It was unique, it was very inspiring. I believe it was something to do with the former mayor of Mississauga.
That's correct.
Well, I don't recollect the show. I wanted to discuss about that.
Yes, so again, there was a way of supporting our local artists. Shahid Rassam is a Pakistani Canadian artist who painted live on sitar music by another great sitar player, who runs the Toronto School of Sitar. And he had also painted Mayor Hazel McCallion's huge portrait, and Hazel McCallion was there at that time. So that's, it's very interesting when you mix. It's like jugalbandi, right? When you mix tabla with sitar, or visual painting with music, or dance with painting. So it's like a fusion combination, and then you stand back and see what comes out. It's the creative juices flowing in all these very creative people.
And that brings me to the other question, is that you have supported a lot of up-and-coming artists from South Asia who are working or have worked or plan to work in Canada or North America. What is it that you do that requires institutional support which you haven't got or haven't been able to get?
So, yes, so I'll name a few artists to start with. So there's Tazeen Qayyum, miniature artist, Rita Saeed, Shahid Rassam is here. Then there are a number of other like Vishal Misra. So it's the critical view that I provide to them. So I keep going and seeing their art, how it's progressing, and if it's not going in a direction, because an artist can get stuck in a sort of box and keep painting what's selling. So if something sells, if horses are selling, then you keep producing horses. So trying to get them out of the comfort zone and make something new, and that is the journey of becoming a great artist. You have to get out of a box and be able to do several things, and then finally find something that's your calling, your signature. So when you look at a horse, you say, yes, this is M.F. Hussain, right? Or you look at a Bindi painting, you say, yeah, this is Raza. Jamni Roy is the dancing woman, right?
It has been a pleasure talking to you, Adil. I hope that we can continue this on another occasion. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure as well, Mayank. And you invited me to talk about something that I'm very passionate about. This show could probably go on for a few hours, but thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Friends, this was Ali Adil Khan, art curator who has been working very actively in the diversity of art in Canada for the last 2 decades. I hope you enjoyed the show. As I end the show always with one request, write to us. This is your show. We want to talk to people who you want to listen to and see. So we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for being with us. This is Mayank Bhatt, Living Multiculturalism. You're watching TAG TV, and the program was brought to you by Canadian Thinkers Forum.